Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. If you're new here, consider subscribing. It really helps keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now, sit back, relax, and let's get into the story. I thought it was just another assignment. A breaking news tip about strange incidents in a small town on the outskirts of the city. People attacking each other in the streets, emergency services overwhelmed, and a growing sense of fear spreading through online whispers. I'd chased stories like this before: mass panic, riots, unexplained illnesses. It always ended the same way: a few days of chaos, a cover-up, and the world moving on. But this time was different. I arrived in the town just before sundown, my press badge clipped to my jacket, my camera gear in the passenger seat. The streets were unusually quiet, like the entire town was holding its breath. No children playing outside, no groups of teenagers hanging around, no casual evening walkers. Just silence. The only movement came from a few distant figures stumbling in the shadows, their motions sluggish and unnatural. Something about it made my skin crawl. I parked near the town square and stepped out, keeping my camera rolling. That was rule number 1. Always keep the camera rolling. Even if I didn't know what I was looking at, someone else might piece it together later. The air smelled wrong, like rot and something metallic. The kind of scent that clings to the back of your throat. Then I saw the first body. A man in a tattered business suit lay sprawled on the pavement, his limbs twisted unnaturally. I took a cautious step closer, my breath hitching as I noticed the deep, ragged wounds along his arms and neck, but there was something even worse: the way his eyes stared, unfocused but not entirely lifeless. I knelt down to get a closer shot, heart pounding. That's when his fingers twitched. I jerked back as his body spasmed violently. His lips pulled back in a grimace, revealing teeth stained dark with something I didn't want to think about. His chest rose with a shuddering gasp, and then he lunged. I scrambled backward, barely dodging his grasping hands. He let out a guttural, broken sound as he dragged himself toward me, his legs unresponsive but his hunger undeterred. My instincts screamed at me to run, but my journalist brain refused. This was my story. This was history happening right in front of me. I aimed my camera at his face, capturing every gruesome detail. His clouded eyes, the dried streaks of red down his chin, the way his fingers clawed at the asphalt. Then I heard more shuffling. Slowly I turned. They were coming from all directions. Dozens of them, their bodies in various states of decay, their eyes locked onto me with eerie focus. Some moved with unsteady, lurching steps. Others sprinted on twisted limbs like marionettes with tangled strings. My survival instincts finally won. I ran. I didn't stop until I found an abandoned gas station. The glass doors were shattered, the inside ransacked. I slipped in, crouching behind an overturned shelf, trying to steady my breathing. I could still hear them outside, groans, feet scraping against pavement. I pulled out my phone to call for help, but there was no signal. That's when I noticed the security monitor behind the counter, the cracked screen flickering between different camera feeds. One showed the parking lot, dozens of those things wandering aimlessly. Another displayed the convenience store's back room. There was someone inside. A man, dressed in a blood-stained uniform, was slumped against the wall, breathing heavily. He hadn't noticed the figure creeping toward him from the darkness, its face barely visible in the dim light. I wanted to shout a warning, but it was too late. The thing lunged, sinking its teeth into the man's shoulder. He let out a muffled scream, struggling, but within seconds his movements slowed. He convulsed, then went still. Then, slowly, he started to move again. I turned away, my stomach twisting. This wasn't just some violent outbreak. This wasn't something that could be explained away by the news as hysteria. This was something else entirely, and I was trapped in the middle of it. The gas station wasn't safe, I knew that much. The glass was broken, and those things were everywhere, but where could I go? The town was falling apart, and the roads were crawling with them. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the camera. I took a deep breath and forced myself to focus. The security monitor flickered again, showing a different feed, the alley behind the gas station. It was empty. I had a chance. Staying low, I moved toward the back exit. Every sound made me flinch. The creak of the floorboards, the rustle of plastic bags, the distant moans from outside. The door to the alley was heavy and stuck, but with a few desperate shoves it gave way. The alley was silent except for the hum of a distant generator. I slipped out and kept moving, hugging the shadows. The town square was out, too many of them. The main roads were no better. But if I could find higher ground, maybe I could get a signal. Maybe I could call for help. I spotted a fire escape on the side of an old apartment building. Climbing it was harder than I thought. My legs felt like lead, and my arms ached from the effort, but I made it to the roof. From up there, I saw the scale of the disaster. Fires burned unchecked in the distance. Cars were smashed and abandoned. Figures moved in the streets below, some alone, others in swarms. I could hear gunshots, sporadic and distant. Someone was still fighting, but for how long? I pulled out my phone again, still no signal. The rooftop door burst open behind me. I spun, my heart leaping into my throat, but it wasn't one of them. It was a man, out of breath and wild-eyed, his clothes torn and stained. He saw me and froze. Are you real?" he asked. I nodded slowly. He sagged against the doorframe. Thank God. I thought I was the only one left. We exchanged names, though they hardly seemed important. He was a local. Had been trying to get his family out when everything fell apart. He didn't know if they'd made it. We stayed low on the roof, watching the streets below. He had a radio, crackling with static and broken transmissions. "Military setting up a perimeter," he said. "But they're not saving anyone. They're containing it." My stomach dropped. "You mean they're going to leave us here?" He didn't answer. The sound of helicopters drew our attention. We watched them sweep over the town, not rescuing, but dropping something. Canisters. Gas hissed from them, rolling through the streets. The infected didn't even flinch, but the people who were still alive, they weren't so lucky. I captured it all on my camera, every horrifying second. If I got out, people needed to see this. They needed to know the truth. But getting out was starting to seem impossible. The man with me had a plan, the train yard. If the tracks were still clear, we could follow them out of town. It was risky, but staying wasn't an option. We climbed down the fire escape, moving fast and quiet. The streets were a maze of wreckage and bodies. Every turn was a risk. We were halfway to the train yard when we heard the scream. A girl's voice, terrified and alone. My companion wanted to leave her. "We can't save everyone," he said. But I couldn't just walk away. I followed the sound to a small house. The front door hung open, the inside dark. I stepped in, camera rolling. The girl was in the corner of the living room, clutching a baseball bat. She couldn't have been older than 10, and she wasn't alone. One of them was there, between us and her. It turned at the sound of my footsteps. I didn't think. I swung the tripod I was carrying, catching it in the side of the head. It stumbled, but didn't go down. My companion fired his pistol. The sound was deafening in the small space, but the thing collapsed. We didn't wait to see if more were coming. We grabbed the girl and ran. The train yard was ahead, and so were the infected. Dozens of them moving toward the sound of the gunshot. We climbed onto the nearest train car, pulling the girl up after us. but there was nowhere to go. They surrounded us on all sides, their hands reaching, their moans rising in a terrible chorus. My camera was still rolling. If these were my last moments, at least the world would know the truth. Then the train started to move. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support keeps these creepypastas coming. Until next time, stay alert, stay safe, and never ignore the feeling that something is watching.